Imagine losing your voice and discovering that silence can speak louder than any word you ever said. Victor Harrington, heir to a fortune built on steel and ambition, woke up one morning and couldn't speak. Not a whisper, not a sound. The doctors called it psychogenic aphonia, trauma-induced voicelessness, no physical damage, just silence. And Victor, a man who commanded boardrooms with a single sentence, who closed billion-dollar deals with his voice alone, was now trapped inside himself. 6 months. 6 months of silence. 6 months of watching his empire slip through his fingers while his younger brother Dylan smiled too wide at every board meeting. 6 months of texts, of written notes no one had patience to read, of being dismissed, interrupted, forgotten. He became invisible, a ghost in his own life. Can a man who lost his voice finally learn to be heard, stay until the end? And if you believe real love begins when someone truly listens, like this video, and subscribe. The mansion felt colder now, empty. The staff moved through rooms like shadows, efficient and distant. His father's voice echoed from the study every night, conference calls, negotiations, decisions made without Victor. He used to be the golden son. Now, he was the silent disappointment. Victor stood by the window of his private library, rain streaking the glass, his reflection barely visible. He pressed his palm against the cold surface. The world outside moved, laughed, spoke, and he couldn't. Then the door opened. She didn't knock, didn't hesitate, just walked in carrying a wooden crate filled with old books, her dark hair tied back, her clothes simple, a grey sweater, worn jeans. She looked up, met his eyes, and smiled. Not pity, not discomfort, just warmth. "Mr. Harrington," she said softly. "I'm Sophia Reyes. I'll be cataloguing your collection." Victor nodded, pointed to the shelves. She understood immediately. "Got it. I'll stay out of your way." But she didn't. Not really. She worked quietly, humming under her breath, old songs he didn't recognize. She didn't try to fill the silence with meaningless chatter. She just existed beside it. And somehow, that made it bearable. Hours passed. The rain grew heavier. Sophia climbed the ladder to reach the top shelf, her fingers tracing the spines of forgotten classics. Victor watched from his desk, pretending to read emails he'd already memorized. She pulled out a leather-bound volume, flipped through the pages, then paused. "Oh," she whispered, "I love this one." She didn't say which, didn't ask if he'd read it, just smiled to herself and placed it gently in the crate. Victor's chest tightened. When was the last time someone shared something with him without expecting a response? The clock struck 6. Sophia climbed down, stretched her back, and glanced at him. "Same time tomorrow?" Victor nodded. She smiled again, this time a little brighter, and left. The library felt different after she was gone. Not empty, just waiting. Victor walked to the crate she'd filled. He pulled out the book she'd paused on, The Little Prince. He opened it to a dog-eared page. A passage underlined in faded pencil. "It is only with the heart that one can see rightly. What is essential is invisible to the eye." His throat ached, not from the silence, from something deeper. That night Dylan stopped by his room, suit still crisp, smile still perfect. "Hey brother, board meeting Friday. Dad thinks it's time I present the merger proposal." He paused, watching for a reaction. "You understand, right? Someone has to keep things moving." Victor said nothing, because he couldn't. Dylan's smile widened. "Glad we're on the same page." The door closed. Victor sat in the dark, fists clenched, jaw tight. He grabbed his phone, typed furiously, "I'm still here." But he didn't send it. What was the point? No one was listening. Except maybe one person had started to. The next morning, Sophia arrived early. She brought coffee, 2 cups, set one on his desk without asking if he wanted it. Just knew. Victor stared at the steam rising from the cup. When was the last time someone anticipated his needs without him having to demand it? She worked in comfortable silence again, but this time she spoke. Not to him, just aloud. My abuela used to say silence is a language too. You just have to learn how to listen. She glanced at him, eyes soft. I think she was right. Victor's hand trembled around the coffee cup. For the first time in 6 months, someone wasn't trying to fix him. They were just there. And something inside his chest, something he thought had died with his voice, began to crack open. But outside the library, Dylan was making calls. The merger was moving forward, the family empire was shifting, and Victor's silence was no longer protection. It was becoming a weapon someone else could use. Would Sophia see the danger before it was too late? Or would Victor's silence cost him everything he never knew he needed? Sophia returned every morning at 8. Always with 2 cups of coffee, always with that quiet smile that didn't demand anything in return. And Victor, who had spent 6 months drowning in isolation, found himself waiting by the window, watching for her arrival. She never asked why he couldn't speak, never pushed, never looked at him like he was broken. She just worked, organized, hummed softly while sorting through decades of forgotten literature. And somehow, in her presence, the silence didn't feel like a prison anymore. It felt like breathing. 1 week passed, then 2. The library transformed under her hands. Chaotic shelves became ordered beauty. Dust gave way to light. But more than that, Victor transformed. He started writing notes, short ones at first, practical. Thank you for the coffee. Sophia read it, smiled, wrote back on the same paper. You take it black, I remember. He stared at those 3 words longer than he should have. Someone remembered. The notes became conversations. Small, careful, real. Why do you hum while you work? Because silence can be heavy. Music makes it lighter. Does it bother you that I don't speak? She looked up from her work, eyes steady, honest. No. I think the world talks too much anyway. Victor's chest tightened. He wrote slower this time, each word deliberate. You're the first person who hasn't tried to fix me. Sophia set down the book she was holding, walked over, sat across from him. Her voice was soft, but it carried weight. Maybe you're not broken, Mr. Harrington. Victor, he wrote quickly. Just Victor. She smiled. Victor. The way she said his name, gentle, unhurried, like it mattered, made something inside him shift. He hadn't heard his own name spoken with care in so long. Everyone else barked it, demanded with it, dismissed with it. But Sophia, she offered it back to him like a gift. That afternoon, his father entered the library unannounced. Expensive suit, cold eyes. He barely glanced at Sophia. Victor, Dylan's presenting the merger Friday. The board expects you there. He paused. You don't have to speak, just show up, nod when appropriate. Victor's jaw clenched. His father turned to leave, then stopped. And make sure this... He gestured vaguely at Sophia, at the books, at everything that had started to feel like hope. Doesn't distract you from what matters. The door closed. Sophia stood frozen, hands still holding a stack of novels. Victor saw it. The slight drop in her shoulders, the way she looked down, small, invisible. He hated it. He grabbed his notebook, wrote fast, angry. You matter. Sophia looked up, eyes wide. Don't let him make you feel like you don't. Her breath caught. She nodded slowly, blinking back something that looked like tears. Then she smiled, fragile, but real. Thank you. Victor wanted to say more. Wanted to write 100 things he didn't know how to explain, but the words stuck. So instead, he did something he hadn't done in months. He stood, walked to the bookshelf, pulled out a worn copy of Pride and Prejudice, handed it to her. Sophia's eyes lit up. "You remembered?" He had. 2 weeks ago, she'd mentioned it in passing, her favorite, the one her mother used to read to her. She held the book like it was sacred. "Can I borrow it?" Victor nodded. That night, Sophia stayed late. The rain returned, drumming against the windows. She sat in the reading chair, legs tucked under her, lost in Austen's world. Victor worked at his desk, pretending to review contracts, but really, he was just watching her. The way she smiled at certain passages, the way she wiped her eyes during the sad parts. She looked up suddenly, catching him. "Sorry, I got carried away." Victor shook his head, wrote, "Don't apologize. It's nice, seeing someone feel something." Sophia's expression softened. "You feel things too, Victor. I see it." He hesitated, then wrote carefully, "How?" "Your eyes," she said simply. "They say everything your voice can't." No one had ever told him that. No one had ever looked closely enough to see. Victor's hand trembled as he wrote again. "What do they say now?" Sophia held his gaze. The air between them shifted, heavier, warmer, dangerous. "That you're tired of being alone." His breath stopped. She stood slowly, walked to his desk, and placed her hand over his, just for a moment. Just long enough for him to feel her warmth. "You're not alone, Victor." Then she left. Victor sat in the empty library, staring at the spot where her hand had been. His heart pounded, his throat ached, not from silence, from wanting. But upstairs, Dylan was already making moves. The merger wasn't just business, it was a takeover. And Victor's silence had given his brother exactly what he needed: time, access, and the board's trust. Friday's meeting would change everything. And Sophia, the one person who saw Victor as more than his voice, more than his name, more than his wealth. She had no idea she'd just stepped into a war she didn't know was coming. Would Victor find his voice in time to protect what mattered? Or would silence cost him the one person who finally made him want to speak? Friday arrived like a storm Victor couldn't outrun. He stood in front of the mirror, adjusting his tie with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. 6 months ago, he would have walked into that boardroom like he owned it. Because he did. Now he was walking in as a ghost, present but powerless, seen but unheard. Dylan had been preparing for weeks. Victor knew because he'd seen the late-night meetings, the closed-door conversations, the way his brother's confidence had grown while his own crumbled. The merger wasn't just a business deal. It was a throne being passed. And Victor, trapped in silence, could only watch it happen. He grabbed his phone, typed and deleted a dozen messages to his father. Please, warnings, anything. But what was the point? Words on a screen had no weight. Not anymore. The car ride to headquarters felt endless. Rain blurred the city. Victor pressed his forehead against the cold window, watching strangers rush past with umbrellas, laughing, talking, living. He envied them, their voices, their ease, their ability to exist in the world without being erased by silence. The boardroom was exactly as he remembered. Long table, leather chairs, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the empire his grandfather built. 12 board members already seated, his father at the head, Dylan beside him, laptop open, smile sharp. Victor took his seat at the far end. No one acknowledged him, not a nod, not a glance. He was furniture, Dylan began, confident, charismatic, every word calculated. He presented the merger like a masterpiece. Growth projections, market expansion, legacy secured. The board listened, nodded, approved. Victor watched his life's work dissolve into his brother's narrative. Every slide, every graph, every promise Dylan made was built on foundations Victor had laid. But no one mentioned his name. His father spoke briefly, praised Dylan's vision, talked about the future, about leadership, about the need for decisive action in uncertain times. He didn't look at Victor once. The vote came swiftly, unanimous, the merger passed. Dylan's hand was shaken, champagne appeared. Victor sat motionless, hands flat on the table, throat burning with words that couldn't escape. He stood, left. No one stopped him. The rain had worsened. Victor walked through it, suit soaking, hair dripping, lungs gasping. He didn't call the car, didn't care. He just walked, blocks, miles, until his legs ached and his chest felt like it might collapse. He ended up at a small park, empty, quiet. He sat on a bench under a bare tree and stared at nothing. His phone buzzed. Dylan's message glowed on the screen. "Thanks for being there today. It meant a lot." Victor's hands curled into fists. He wanted to scream, wanted to throw the phone, wanted to rage against every injustice, every dismissal, every moment his silence had been weaponized against him. But he couldn't. So he just sat there, broken, invisible. Hours passed. The rain softened. The sky dimmed. Victor finally returned home, moving through the mansion like a shadow. Staff avoided him. His father's study door was closed. Dylan's laughter echoed from somewhere upstairs. Victor went to the library, his sanctuary, the only place that still felt like his, and Sophia was there. She looked up from her work, eyes widening when she saw him, drenched, shaking, hollow. She didn't ask questions, didn't speak. She just walked to him, grabbed a blanket from the reading chair and wrapped it around his shoulders. Then she guided him to sit, made him tea, set it in front of him without ceremony, and sat across from him, waiting. Not for explanations, just there. Victor's hands trembled around the warm cup. He stared into the steam, vision blurring, and then, for the first time in 6 months, tears came, silent, relentless. He couldn't stop them. Sophia reached across the table, placed her hand over his, didn't pull away, didn't flinch, just held him and steady, warm, real. Time blurred. The tea went cold. The rain returned, but Sophia stayed. Eventually, Victor pulled out his notebook. His handwriting was shaky, desperate. "I lost everything today." Sophia read it, then wrote below, "No, you're still here. That's not nothing." Victor's chest cracked open. He wrote again, faster now. "No one sees me. No one listens. I'm invisible." Sophia's response was immediate, underlined twice. "I see you, Victor." He looked up, met her eyes. They were fierce, honest, unwavering. "I see you," she had written. And suddenly, it was the only thing that mattered. Victor's breath hitched. He wanted to say so much. Wanted to explain the meeting, the betrayal, the suffocating weight of being erased. But instead, he just wrote 2 words, "Thank you." Sophia smiled softly, then stood, walked around the table, and did something that shattered him completely. She hugged him. Not a polite embrace, not a comforting pat. A real hug. Arms wrapped around him, head against his shoulder, holding him like he was worth holding. Victor froze. Then slowly his arms lifted, wrapped around her, held on like she was the only solid thing in a world that had crumbled beneath him. They stayed like that, silent, connected. 2 people who barely knew each other, but somehow understood everything. When Sophia finally pulled back, her eyes were wet too. She picked up the notebook, wrote carefully, "You're not alone. Not anymore." Victor nodded, because he couldn't write, couldn't think, could only feel the unbearable relief of being seen. But outside the library, Dylan was celebrating. The merger was just the beginning. He had plans, bigger ones, and Victor's silence had made him careless. He hadn't noticed the files, the emails, the evidence of something darker hidden beneath the surface of the deal. And Sophia, the woman who organized, who paid attention, who saw details everyone else missed. She was about to stumble onto a truth that would put her directly in Dylan's path. Would Victor find the strength to protect her? Or would his silence become the cage that trapped them both? Sophia began noticing the inconsistencies 3 days later. Small things at first. Files mislabeled. Documents dated incorrectly. Financial reports stacked in the wrong section of Victor's private archive. She was meticulous by nature. Her grandmother had taught her that details mattered, that carelessness revealed character. So when she found a folder marked Merger Final Draft, buried behind outdated tax records, she hesitated. Then she opened it. The numbers didn't match. Projections Dylan had presented to the board were inflated. Costs buried, risks omitted. And beneath it all, a secondary agreement, unsigned, undated, that transferred controlling shares not to the family trust, but to an offshore entity. Dylan's name appeared 3 times. Victor's appeared nowhere. Sophia's hands trembled. She closed the folder quickly, heart pounding. This wasn't her business, wasn't her world. She was just there to organize books, to catalog a library, to exist quietly in the background of someone else's life. But Victor's face flashed through her mind. The way he'd looked that rainy night, broken, erased, invisible. She couldn't unsee what she'd found. That evening, Sophia stayed late again. Victor worked at his desk, reviewing contracts he could no longer negotiate. She approached slowly, the folder tucked under her arm, pulse racing. She set it in front of him without a word. Victor looked up, confused, then down at the label. His entire body went rigid. He opened it, read, flipped pages, read more. His jaw clenched, his breathing quickened. His hands shook so violently the papers rustled. Sophia watched him unravel, watched rage and betrayal and devastation cross his face in waves. She wanted to comfort him, to say something, but words felt inadequate. So she just stood there, a silent witness to his silent grief. Victor grabbed his notebook, wrote with force that nearly tore the paper. "How long has this been here?" Sophia shook her head, wrote back, "I don't know. I just found it today." Victor stood abruptly, paced, pressed his palms against his temples. He wanted to scream, to confront Dylan, to storm into his father's study and demand answers, but he couldn't, because silence had no force, no weight, no power. He was trapped. Sophia stepped closer, placed a hand on his arm. He stopped pacing, looked at her, and in her eyes he saw something he desperately needed. Belief. She believed him, believed in him, even when no one else did. Victor exhaled slowly, picked up his pen, wrote carefully, "If I show this to my father, Dylan will say I forged it, say I'm unstable, jealous." Sophia read it, frowned, wrote back, "Then we need proof. He's the one lying." Victor's eyes widened. We. She'd said we. She wasn't walking away, wasn't staying neutral. She was choosing him. He wrote quickly, "This could be dangerous. Dylan is..." Sophia interrupted by writing firmly, "I'm not afraid of your brother." Victor stared at her. This woman who had every reason to stay silent, to protect herself, to let powerful men destroy each other while she remained safely invisible. And yet here she was, standing beside him, ready to fight. He wrote one more line, "Why are you doing this?" Sophia's answer was simple, devastating. "Because you matter." Victor's throat burned, not from aphonia, from something far more painful. Hope. They spent the next 4 days gathering evidence. Sophia catalogued every discrepancy, every forged signature, every hidden clause. Victor accessed files Dylan thought he'd erased. Together, they built a case, silent, meticulous, unshakable. But Dylan wasn't careless. He was watching. He'd noticed Sophia's extended hours, noticed the way Victor looked at her, noticed that his brother, for the first time in months, seemed less defeated. And Dylan understood power, understood leverage. Understood that the easiest way to control someone was to threaten what they loved, so he made a call. The next morning, Sophia arrived to find security waiting at the mansion gates. They were polite but firm. Her employment had been terminated, effective immediately. No explanation, no severance, just a box with her belongings and an order to leave. Sophia stood there, rain beginning to fall, clutching the box, trying to process what had just happened. She pulled out her phone, texted Victor. "They won't let me in." Inside, Victor was in a meeting with his father and Dylan. Financial review. Routine. Until Dylan casually mentioned that he'd let go of some non-essential staff. Cost-cutting measures. His father nodded approvingly. Victor's phone buzzed. He read Sophia's message. His blood went cold. He stood abruptly, grabbed his notebook, wrote in large letters, "Who did you fire?" Dylan smiled. "Just the girl cataloging your books. We don't need archivists." "We need focus." Victor's hand slammed on the table. His father looked startled. Dylan's smile widened. "Problem, brother." Victor's chest heaved. His vision blurred. Every molecule of his body screamed to speak, to rage, to defend her. But his voice remained locked, useless, silent. He turned, left, ran. He found Sophia still standing at the gates, soaked, shaking. When she saw him, relief flooded her face, then concern, because Victor looked shattered. He pulled out his phone. Typed desperately, "I'm sorry, this is my fault, he did this because of me." Sophia read it, then looked up at him. Rain streamed down her face, but her voice was steady. "Then let's make sure it wasn't for nothing." She handed him a flash drive, small, unassuming, containing every document they'd found, every piece of evidence. "I made a copy," she'd written on a note tucked inside the box. Victor stared at it, at her, at the woman who'd lost her job defending him, who stood in the rain refusing to walk away, who believed he was worth fighting for. And something inside him broke, not his spirit, his fear. Because Dylan had just made a fatal mistake, he'd turned Victor's silence into fury and given him a reason to find his voice again. Victor didn't return to the mansion that night. He couldn't, not yet. Instead, he drove to the only place that still felt neutral, a small cafe near the harbor where no one knew his name, where silence wasn't strange, where he could breathe. Sophia sat across from him, hair still damp, hands wrapped around a cup of tea she hadn't touched. The flash drive lay between them on the table like a grenade. Evidence, truth, power, but also risk. If they moved forward, there would be no going back. Dylan would retaliate. His father would choose sides. The empire would fracture. Victor pulled out his notebook, wrote slowly, each word weighted. "You should walk away. This isn't your fight." Sophia read it, then picked up the pen and wrote back with deliberate force. "Stop trying to protect me by pushing me away." Victor flinched. She'd seen right through him. That's what he was doing, trying to save her by making her leave, by being noble, by sacrificing the one good thing in his life because he believed that's what she deserved. But Sophia wasn't asking for protection. She was asking to stay. She wrote again, "I choose this, I choose you. Stop deciding for me." Victor's vision blurred. He nodded. Once. Enough. They spent the next 2 days in that cafe, building a strategy. Sophia organized the evidence into a presentation. Clean, undeniable, devastating. Victor reached out to board members he still trusted, carefully, quietly, through encrypted messages. He didn't accuse Dylan outright. He just asked questions. Planted doubts. Let curiosity do the work. But doubt was slow, and Dylan was fast. On the third day, Victor's father called. His voice through the phone speaker was cold, formal, distant. "Emergency board meeting, tomorrow, 10 a.m. Your presence is required." Victor's stomach dropped. This wasn't protocol, this was an ambush. Dylan had moved first. That night, Victor couldn't sleep. He stood on the balcony of the small hotel room he'd rented. City lights stretched below, wind cutting through his shirt. Sophia found him there, wrapped a blanket around his shoulders without asking, and stood beside him in silence. Minutes passed. Then she pulled out her phone and typed, "What are you afraid of?" Victor read it, exhaled slowly, typed back, "That I'll stand in front of them tomorrow and still won't be able to speak. That silence will win again." Sophia's response came quickly, "Your silence isn't weakness, Victor. It never was. They just convinced you it was." Victor turned to look at her. Really look at her. This woman who'd walked into his life cataloging books and ended up cataloging his heart, who saw him not as broken but as whole, who fought beside him when everyone else had walked away. He typed again, "If this goes wrong tomorrow..." Sophia interrupted by taking his phone and typing firmly, "It won't, because you're not alone anymore." Victor's chest tightened. He wanted to kiss her, wanted to pull her close and let her warmth erase every cold, lonely moment of the past 6 months. But fear held him back. Fear that he'd lose her. Fear that loving her would put her in more danger. Fear that he wasn't enough, so instead he just took her hand, held it. Let that be his voice. Sophia squeezed back. Understood. The next morning arrived too quickly. Victor dressed in his sharpest suit, armor for a war he'd been forced into. Sophia insisted on coming. He tried to refuse, tried to protect her again, but she shut him down with a single look. They arrived at headquarters together. The building felt hostile now, sterile, cold. Employees stared as they passed. Whispers followed. Victor kept his head high, Sophia at his side, the flash drive in his pocket. The boardroom was packed, all 12 members, his father at the head. Dylan beside him, confident, smiling, and in the corner Victor noticed something that made his blood run cold. 2 lawyers, corporate, hostile. This wasn't just an ambush, this was an execution. His father spoke first. No greeting, no warmth, just business. "We're here to discuss concerns raised about Victor's capacity to fulfill his duties as co-chair." Victor's jaw clenched. Co-chair, a title Dylan wanted erased. Dylan took over smoothly. Presented a case built on Victor's absence, his silence, his inability to communicate effectively with stakeholders. He showed emails Victor hadn't responded to because he couldn't. Meetings Victor had missed because no one had accommodated his condition. Decisions made without him because no one had bothered to include him. Dylan painted Victor as incapable, unstable, a liability. The board listened, nodded. Some looked uncomfortable. Most looked convinced. Victor sat frozen. This was it, the moment he'd been dreading. The moment silence would cost him everything. But then Sophia stood. Every head turned. She wasn't supposed to be there, wasn't part of this world. But she walked forward calmly, connected a laptop to the projector, and opened the presentation they'd built together. Dylan's face went pale. His father frowned. The lawyers tensed. Sophia didn't speak. She just let the evidence speak for itself. Slide after slide. Forged documents. Hidden accounts. Inflated projections. And the final slide, the offshore entity. Dylan's name. The betrayal made visible. The room went silent. Suffocatingly silent. Dylan recovered quickly. Stood. Pointed at Sophia with manufactured outrage. "This woman has no authority here. She's a disgruntled ex-employee making baseless accusations." But Victor was already standing, already moving. He walked to the front of the room, took the laptop, and opened a video file they'd saved for this exact moment. Security footage. Dylan's office. Late night, shredding documents. The same documents now displayed on the screen. Undeniable. Dylan's mask cracked. His father's face turned to stone. The board erupted in whispers. And Victor, silent, voiceless, supposedly powerless Victor, had just dismantled his brother without speaking a single word. But Dylan wasn't finished. Cornered animals were dangerous, and he'd just been backed into a corner in front of everyone who mattered. Would Victor's silence finally be enough, or had he just started a war that would destroy them all? The boardroom remained frozen in that terrible silence, the kind that precedes an explosion. Dylan's hands gripped the table edge, knuckles white, jaw clenched so tight it trembled. His father stared at the screen, face unreadable, a statue carved from disappointment and rage. The lawyers exchanged glances. The board members shifted uncomfortably, eyes darting between the brothers. Then Dylan laughed, low, bitter, dangerous. He turned to Victor, and for the first time in months there was no pretense, no charm, just raw contempt. "You think this changes anything? You think they'll choose you?" He gestured at the board, at their father, at the empire surrounding them. "You can't even speak, Victor. You can't lead. You can't inspire. You're a ghost pretending to be a man." The words landed like blows. Victor's breath caught. Because part of him, the broken, silent part, believed it. He'd spent 6 months being invisible, being dismissed, being erased. And now, standing in front of everyone, evidence in hand, he still couldn't defend himself with his own voice. But Sophia could. She stepped forward, positioned herself slightly in front of Victor, and her voice cut through the room with startling clarity. "You're right. He can't speak. But he can lead. He can strategize. He can see what others miss. And unlike you, Mr. Harrington, he doesn't need to lie to do it." Dylan's face darkened. "You have no idea what you've walked into." Sophia didn't flinch. "I know exactly what I've walked into. A family that mistakes volume for value, that confuses words for worth. Victor's silence doesn't make him weak, it made him careful, observant, and that's why he caught you." The room shifted. Some board members nodded subtly. Others looked at Victor with something new, not pity, but reconsideration. His father finally spoke. His voice was low, controlled, lethal. "Victor, is this evidence legitimate?" Victor nodded once, firm, certain. "And you've verified every document?" Another nod. His father turned to Dylan. "Well?" Dylan's composure shattered. "This is a setup. She planted those files, she—" But Victor was already moving. He pulled out his phone, typed quickly, and handed it to his father. The message read, "I have the original documents, time-stamped, backed up, witnessed. Dylan altered the merger to steal the company. I have proof." His father read it. His expression didn't change, but something in his eyes did. A flicker, recognition, maybe regret. He looked at Dylan. "Get out." Dylan's face went pale. "Dad, out. Now, before I have security remove you." For a moment, Dylan looked like he might fight, might rage, might burn everything down on his way out. But then his eyes landed on Victor, silent, standing, unbroken, and something in him crumbled. He grabbed his briefcase, walked to the door, stopped, looked back at Victor one last time. "You won't last. You're still just a man who can't speak." Then he was gone. The room exhaled collectively. The lawyers left quickly. Board members murmured, some congratulating Victor with handshakes, others looking uncertain, shaken. His father dismissed them all with a wave. Soon only 3 remained: Victor, Sophia, and the man who'd built this empire and watched his sons try to destroy it. His father stared at Victor for a long time. Then he pulled out a chair, sat heavily, suddenly looked older, tired. "I should have listened." Victor didn't move, didn't nod, didn't forgive. His father continued, voice rough with something that might have been guilt. "I thought silence meant surrender. I thought if you couldn't fight with words, you couldn't fight at all. I was wrong." He looked at Sophia. "And you risked everything for him." Sophia met his gaze evenly. "I didn't risk anything. I just chose the right side." His father almost smiled, almost. Then he stood, walked to Victor and extended his hand. "The company is yours. Rebuild it however you see fit." Victor stared at the offered hand. 6 months ago, he would have taken it gratefully, desperately. But now, standing here, he realized something fundamental had changed. He didn't want the company. Not like this. Not out of pity or guilt or damage control. He wanted to be seen, heard, valued. Not for his voice, for him. Victor pulled out his phone, typed carefully, "I'll stay, but on my terms. New structure, new leadership model, and Sophia stays as strategic advisor." His father raised an eyebrow. "She's a librarian." Victor typed firmly. "She's the smartest person in this building, and she sees what everyone else misses." Sophia's eyes widened. She started to protest, to say she wasn't qualified, wasn't trained, wasn't... But Victor took her hand, stopped her. His eyes said everything his voice couldn't. "You are enough. You've always been enough." His father watched them, then nodded slowly. "Fine. Your terms." He left. And suddenly the boardroom was empty except for Victor and Sophia. The weight of what had just happened settled over them. Victory, vindication, but also exhaustion, relief, and something neither of them had allowed themselves to fully feel until now. Hope. Sophia turned to Victor. "You did it." Victor shook his head. Typed, "We did it." She smiled. Then her expression shifted. Vulnerable, uncertain, brave. "What happens now?" Victor looked at her. Really looked at her. The woman who'd walked into his silence and made it bearable. Who fought for him when no one else would. Who believed in him when he'd stopped believing in himself. He stepped closer, set down his phone, took both her hands, and for the first time in 6 months, Victor tried to speak. Not a full sentence, not a speech, just sound. A whisper, rough, broken, barely audible, but there. Stay. One word, one breath, one truth. Sophia's eyes filled with tears. "I'm not going anywhere." Victor pulled her close, held her like she was the only thing anchoring him to the world. And maybe she was. Outside, the city continued. The empire stood. Dylan was gone. His father was reckoning with his mistakes. But inside that empty boardroom, 2 people who'd found each other in silence finally allowed themselves to believe in sound. In voice, in love. But healing isn't linear, and sometimes the hardest battle isn't winning. It's learning to live after the war ends. 6 months later, Victor stood in the same library where everything had changed. But it looked different now, brighter. The heavy curtains had been replaced with sheer ones that let morning light flood the room. Sophia's doing. She'd insisted that spaces needed to breathe, that hiding from the world only made silence heavier. The company had transformed too. Victor had restructured leadership into collaborative teams where communication happened through multiple channels, video messages, written briefs, visual presentations. He'd proven that voice wasn't the only form of power, that listening mattered as much as speaking, that silence, when chosen rather than imposed, could be strength. Dylan had disappeared, moved to Europe, cut ties. Their father had tried reaching out once, but Victor had stopped him. Some bridges needed to stay burned. Some betrayals didn't deserve forgiveness, only distance. His father had stepped back from daily operations. Age and regret had softened him. He visited occasionally, awkward and trying, attempting to rebuild something that might never fully heal. Victor let him try, not for his father's sake, for his own. Because holding on to rage was exhausting, and he'd been exhausted long enough. But the biggest change was standing across from him now. Sophia, wearing a tailored suit that still looked slightly uncomfortable on her, hair pulled back professionally, tablet in hand. She'd become exactly what Victor knew she would be, indispensable. She saw patterns others missed, asked questions no one else thought to ask, challenged him when he needed it, supported him when he couldn't stand alone. And somewhere between strategy meetings and late-night planning sessions and shared silences that spoke volumes, they'd fallen completely, irrevocably in love. Victor's voice had returned gradually, not all at once, not magically, just slowly, like spring thawing winter. A word here, a sentence there. His therapist said trauma released in layers, that healing wasn't linear, that some days he'd speak easily and others he'd retreat into silence. Sophia never pushed, never demanded. She simply existed beside him in whatever form he needed. Today was different, though. Today was the anniversary of the day she'd walked into his library, carrying a crate of books and accidentally carrying his heart along with it. Victor had been planning this for weeks, quietly, carefully, with the same meticulous attention he'd once given to billion-dollar deals, but now reserved for moments that actually mattered. Sophia finished reviewing the quarterly report on her tablet, completely unaware. She looked up, smiled that smile that still undid him every time, and started gathering her things. Meeting with the Tokyo team in 20 minutes. You ready? Victor shook his head, gestured to the window. Outside, snow was beginning to fall, the first of the season. Can we skip it? Sophia raised an eyebrow, amused. Victor Harrington wants to skip a meeting. Are you feeling okay? He smiled, took her hand, led her to the center of the library, where they'd first truly seen each other, where silence had stopped being a prison and started being a language. Sophia's expression shifted from playful to curious to something softer as Victor pulled out his phone. But instead of typing, he took a breath, spoke. His voice still carried rough edges, still wavered occasionally, but it was his. A year ago, I thought I'd lost everything. My voice, my purpose, myself. Sophia's eyes widened. He rarely spoke this much, rarely pushed himself this far. Then you walked in. And you didn't try to fix me, didn't pity me, you just saw me, the real me. Not the heir, not the executive, not the broken man. Just me. His voice cracked slightly. He paused, breathed, continued. You taught me that silence isn't emptiness, that love doesn't need words to be real, that being seen matters more than being heard. Victor reached into his pocket, pulled out a small box. Sophia's hand flew to her mouth. I know I'm not easy. I know there will be days I can't speak. Days I retreat, days I struggle, but I also know that I want every single one of those days to be with you. He opened the box. A simple ring, elegant, understated, exactly her style. Sophia Reyes, will you marry me? The library fell silent. Not the heavy, suffocating silence of isolation, but the sacred silence of a moment too big for sound. Sophia's eyes filled with tears. She nodded once, then laughed, then pulled him close and kissed him with everything they'd never needed words to say. When they finally pulled apart, she whispered against his lips, yes, 1,000 times yes. Victor slipped the ring on her finger, held her hand, marveled at how something so small could mean everything. Sophia pulled back slightly, eyes shining. You know what's funny? What? I came here to catalog books, to organize stories other people wrote. And somehow, I ended up living the most beautiful one I've ever known. Victor's throat tightened. He cupped her face gently. It's not over. We're just starting. Then let's make it unforgettable. Outside, snow continued falling. The city moved on. Empires rose and fell. Power shifted hands. But inside that library, where a silent man had learned to be heard and a humble woman had learned she'd always been enough, love rewrote every ending into a beginning. Victor had lost his voice once, had been broken by silence, had believed he was invisible. But Sophia had taught him the most important truth of all. The loudest declarations aren't spoken. They're lived, chosen, felt. And sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is nothing at all. Just hold the hand of the person who sees you, and let love be the language that needs no translation. If this story touched your heart, if you believe real love begins when someone truly listens, leave a comment below. Rate this story from 0 to 10, and if you stayed until the end, thank you. For listening, for feeling, for believing that silence can speak louder than words. Subscribe for more stories that remind us we're all searching to be seen, to be heard, to be loved, exactly as we are.